Welcome, dear listener, to a story from the ancient world. Let yourself settle into stillness. Let the day fall away. Tonight, we travel back through time to an age when gods walked among mortals, when the line between the human and the divine was thin as mist, and when every stone and stream held its own secret sorrow. This is a story about Medusa, but not the story you may have heard before. This is a story told softly, in the quiet hours, with compassion for all who suffer beneath the weight of fate. Let us begin, slowly, gently, and let the ancient world unfold around you like a dream. Long ago, when the world was younger and the gods still cared to meddle in mortal affairs, there stood a temple on the edge of the sea. It was a temple dedicated to Athena, goddess of wisdom, strategy, and the clear light of reason. The temple was built of white marble that glowed like pearl in the sunlight, with columns that rose tall and straight toward the sky. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of olive oil and incense, myrrh and frankincense that drifted in slow spirals toward the high ceiling. The temple stood on a cliff overlooking the wine-dark sea, and from its steps one could see the waves rolling in one after another, eternal and unchanging. Gulls circled overhead, their cries distant and mournful. The wind carried the salt smell of the ocean, and at night the stars reflected on the water like scattered diamonds. In this temple served a young woman named Medusa. She was a priestess, devoted to the goddess, and she had given her life to this service willingly and with joy. Medusa was known for her beauty, hair like rivers of dark silk, eyes the color of deep amber, a face that seemed carved by a sculptor's loving hand. But more than her beauty, she was known for her gentleness, her devotion, and the quiet grace with which she moved through her days. Every morning, Medusa would wake before dawn. She would light the oil lamps in the temple, filling the sacred space with warm, golden light. She would sweep the marble floors until they shone. She would arrange offerings on the altar: fresh bread, honey, wine, flowers gathered from the hillside. She would stand before the great statue of Athena, arms raised, and speak the ancient prayers, her voice soft and steady. And then she would spend the day in quiet service, greeting pilgrims who came seeking wisdom, tending the sacred flame, copying texts in the scriptorium, her hand steady as she shaped each letter with care. Her life was simple, peaceful, and full of purpose. She had chosen this path, and she did not regret it. There was a beauty in the rhythm of the days, in the repetition of ritual, in the sense of being part of something larger and older than herself. In the evenings, when her duties were complete, Medusa would sometimes walk along the cliff path, watching the sun sink into the sea, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold and violet. She would feel the wind in her hair and listen to the eternal song of the waves, and she would feel at peace. She did not know that her peace was fragile. She did not know that the gods, for all their power, could be cruel in ways beyond mortal understanding. One night, when the moon was dark and the stars were hidden behind clouds, something changed. Medusa was alone in the temple, tending the eternal flame that burned before the statue of Athena. The other priestesses had retired to their chambers. The pilgrims had all gone home. The temple was silent except for the soft crackling of the fire and the distant murmur of the coin. See, she did not hear him approach. One moment she was alone, and the next she was not. Poseidon, god of the sea, lord of earthquakes, master of storms, stood before her. He was tall and powerful, his presence filling the temple like a wave crashing against stone. His eyes were the color of deep water, shifting between green and gray and blue. His hair fell in dark waves around his shoulders. He smelled of salt and seaweed in the endless depths of the ocean. Medusa stepped back, her heart suddenly racing. "My lord," she whispered, bowing her head, for what else could a mortal do in the presence of a god? But Poseidon had not come to receive worship. He had come because he had seen her, had watched her from the sea, had admired her beauty, had decided that he wanted her. What happened next in that sacred space, in the temple dedicated to Athena, in the presence of the goddesses? Statue this is where the old stories grow dark, where they speak of violation and helplessness, of divine power crushing mortal will. But we will not linger on this moment. We will not make it loud or graphic or cruel. We will only say this: Medusa, who had given her life to service, who had kept herself pure and devoted, who had done nothing wrong. Medusa was broken that night by a god who cared nothing for her wishes, her vows, or her pain. And when it was over, Poseidon left as quickly as he had come, disappearing like mist over water, leaving Medusa alone on the cold marble floor, trembling and weeping, her white robes stained, her peace shattered like a dropped mirror. She did not sleep that night. She lay on the floor of the temple and watched the stars slowly wheel across the sky beyond the columns, and she felt as though she had been torn from herself, as though she was floating somewhere above her own body, watching it lie there, small and broken and alone. And she waited for the dawn and dreaded it. Morning came, as mornings always do, indifferent to sorrow. Medusa rose on shaking legs. She bathed in the sacred spring, scrubbing her skin until it was red and raw, trying to wash away what could not be washed away. She put on fresh robes. She plaited her hair with trembling fingers. She went to the altar to light the morning lamps. But when she stood before the statue of Athena, something was different. The stone eyes, which had always seemed kind, now seemed cold. The marble face, which had always seemed serene, now seemed angry. And then the statue moved. Not much, just a subtle shift, a tilting of the head, a narrowing of the eyes. But it was enough. The goddess was present. The goddess was rare, and the goddess was furious. "You have defiled my temple," came the voice, cold and clear as a winter stream. It did not come from the statue, but from everywhere at once, filling the temple, pressing down on Medusa like a physical weight. Medusa fell to her knees, her heart breaking anew. "My lady, I did not. I could not. He was." But the goddess did not want to hear. Perhaps she knew the truth. Perhaps she understood that Medusa was blameless. But gods do not always act with justice. Sometimes they act with pride, with jealousy, with anger that has no reasonable target, and so finds an unreasonable one. Athena could not punish Poseidon. He was her equal, her fellow Olympian, her rival in power. But she could punish the mortal girl who had been in her temple when it was defiled. "You have broken your vows," Athena said, and her voice held no mercy. "You have brought shame to this sacred place, and so you will be transformed. Your beauty, which drew his eye, will become a weapon that turns all who look upon you to stone. You will be shunned, feared, hated. You will be called a monster, and you will live alone until a hero comes to end your cursed existence." Medusa opened her mouth to protest, to plead, to beg for mercy. But the transformation had already begun. She felt it, starting in her scalp, a tingling, then a burning, then a sensation like her hair was coming alive. She reached up with trembling hands and felt movement beneath her fingers. Not hair, but something else, something that writhed and coiled. Serpents. Her hair had become serpents. She looked down at her hands and saw her skin taking on a greenish tint, her fingernails hardening into claws. She felt her teeth sharpening in her mouth, her tongue becoming forked, and her eyes. Oh, her eyes. She could feel something changing in her eyes, something cold and terrible taking root in her gaze. She wanted to scream, but all that came out was a hiss. When the transformation was complete, Athena spoke once more. "Go, leave this place. Hide yourself on some distant island where no one will find you. Live with what you have become, and know that this is justice." Then the presence of the goddess withdrew. and Medusa was alone once more. She stumbled out of the temple into the morning light, and the young priestess who had been approaching saw her and opened her mouth to greet her, and turned to stone. The statue stood there on the temple steps, forever frozen in that moment of surprise, mouth open, hand raised in greeting, eyes wide. Medusa looked at what she had done and felt something inside her shatter completely. She ran. Medusa did not remember the journey. She traveled by night, keeping her eyes downcast, covering her face with a veil, avoiding all living things. When she encountered travelers on the road, she would hide, pressing herself into the shadows, waiting for them to pass. Birds that flew too close and met her gaze by accident fell from the sky, their bodies hardening into stone before they hit the ground. A fox that emerged from the underbrush, curious, went still and gray and cold. A deer drinking from a stream looked up at the wrong moment and became a statue of a deer, perfect in every detail, frozen forever. Medusa learned to keep her eyes closed as much as possible, to navigate by sound and touch and smell. She learned to sense the presence of living things and turn away before her gaze could harm them. She traveled for weeks, maybe months. She lost track of time. Eventually, she came to the sea. She stood on a rocky shore, waves crashing against the stones, and she looked out at the gray water and felt nothing. No fear, no hope, just emptiness. She found a small boat, half rotted and abandoned. She climbed into it and pushed off from the shore, letting the current take her wherever it would. She drifted for days. When she finally washed up on an island, she did not know its name and did not care. It was small, rocky, covered in scrub and twisted olive trees. There were ruins here, the remains of some ancient settlement long abandoned, stone walls crumbled by time, a temple with no roof open to the sky, empty streets where grass grew between the paving stones. It was perfect. No one lived here. No one would come here. She could be alone. She could harm no one else. Medusa made her home in the ruins of the old temple. She cleared a space among the fallen columns. She made a bed of grass and old sailcloth. She survived on rainwater collected and broken, amphorae on wild figs and olives, on shellfish gathered from the tide pools, and she learned to live with what she had become. Years passed. Medusa did not age, or if she did, it was so slowly that she could not perceive it. The curse that had transformed her had also, it seemed, made her something more than mortal, something trapped between the human and the divine, something that would neither age nor die of natural causes. She lived alone on her island, and slowly, very slowly, she began to create something beautiful from her curse. In the beginning, creatures would come to the island by accident, birds blown off course, goats from a neighboring island that swam across the narrow strait, sailors who landed seeking water. And Medusa, no matter how careful she was, would sometimes be seen, and those who saw her would turn to stone. At first, this filled her with horror and guilt. But after many years, after she had grown numb to the endless solitude, after she had stopped thinking of herself as human, she began to see the statues differently. They were beautiful. Each one captured a moment, a bird with wings spread in flight, suspended forever in the air, a sailor, with one hand raised to shield his eyes, frozen in that eternal gesture, a goat standing on its hind legs, reaching for an olive branch. They were scattered across the island, these stone figures, and over time, they began to look less like the victims of a curse and more like sculptures in a garden. Medusa began to arrange them. She moved the smaller statues, positioning them in pleasant groupings. She placed the bird statues in the branches of trees, creating the illusion of a flock frozen in time. She set the animal statues in clearings, as though they were grazing peacefully. She even began to talk to them, not because she thought they could hear, but because the silence was too heavy, too complete, and the sound of her own voice, even if it came out as a hiss, was better than nothing. "Good morning," she would say to the stone sailor. "I trust you slept well." She would tell. The stone goat about the weather, about the figs she had gathered, about the dreams she had. She would sit with the stone bird and remember what it had been like to hear birdsong, to wake to the sound of morning voices. And slowly, very slowly, the garden of stone became something that was hers, something that was almost home. On warm afternoons, when the sun was high and the island was drowsy with heat, Medusa would sit in the shade of an old olive tree and let herself remember. She would remember the temple by the sea, the cool marble halls, the scent of incense. She would remember the temple by the sea, the cool marble halls, the scent of incense. She would remember other priestesses, their faces now faded and blurred by time, but their kindness still vivid in her heart. She would remember the rituals, the prayers, the sense of purpose that had filled her days. She would remember her life before the curse, when she had been human, when her reflection in the sacred spring had shown her own face and not the face of a monster. Sometimes the memories made her weep, but often they brought a strange kind of peace. They reminded her that she had not always been this, that somewhere beneath the scales and the serpents and the cursed gaze, there was still the girl who had loved the quiet rhythms of temple service, who had found joy in simplicity, who had wanted nothing more than to serve her goddess with devotion. That girl was still there, buried deep, but not gone. At night, Medusa would dream. She dreamed of transformation reversed. She dreamed of transformation reversed. She dreamed of walking into the sea and being cleansed, emerging as herself again, her hair flowing dark and smooth, her eyes soft and human. She dreamed of forgiveness, though she did not know from whom she sought it. She dreamed of the goddess Athena coming to her, not in anger but in sorrow, saying, "I was wrong. I was cruel. I am sorry." But in the morning she would wake to find herself unchanged, the serpents of her hair stirring as consciousness returned, and she would accept it and rise and continue. One evening, as the sun was setting and the sky was painted in shades of amber and rose, Medusa sat at the edge of the cliff, looking out at the sea. She heard footsteps behind her. This was not unusual. Over the years, a few sailors had landed on the island, seeking shelter or fresh water. They always met the same fate: another statue for her garden. But this time, the footsteps stopped. A voice spoke. "Please, do not turn around." It was a young man's voice, gentle and respectful. Medusa's heart clenched. It had been so long since she had heard another human voice directed at her with anything other than fear or anger. "Who are you?" she asked, keeping her gaze fixed on the sea. "My name is of no importance," the young man said. "I am a traveler. I saw smoke from your fire and thought there might be someone here who could offer shelter for the night. I did not know. I have heard the stories of this island, of the monster who lives here, and yet you speak to me," Medusa said bitterly. "Are you not afraid I will turn and strike you down with my gaze?" "I am afraid," the young man admitted, "but I am also curious. The stories say you are a monster, but your voice sounds sad, not monstrous, just sad." They were quiet for a long moment, the only sound, the waves below and the evening wind. "I was not always a monster," Medusa said finally. "Once I was a priestess. I served the goddess Athena with devotion and joy. And then something happened that was not my fault, but I was punished for it anyway. And I was made into this creature who harms all she looks upon, this thing that must live alone." "That is unjust," the young man said quietly. "The gods are not always just," Medusa replied. "I learned that the hard way." They talked for a long time as the sun sank below the horizon and the stars emerged one by one. Medusa kept her gaze on the sea. The young man sat several paces behind her. out of the range of even an accidental glance. He told her about the world beyond the island, about the cities and kingdoms, about the wars and politics, about the wars and politics, about the ordinary lives of ordinary people. She told him about her island, about her garden of stone, about the solitude that was both unbearable and necessary. When the moon rose full and bright, the young man stood. "I should go," he said. "My ship leaves with the morning tide, but thank you for speaking with me, for reminding me that the world is more complicated than the stories we tell about it." "Wait," Medusa said. "What is your name? You said it was not important, but I would like to know." There was a pause. "Perseus," the young man said, and Medusa's heart went cold. She knew that name. The prophecies had spoken it. The oracle had whispered it. Perseus, son of Zeus, the hero who would come to slay the monster, to take her head as a prize. This was the one who would end her. But tonight he did not sound like a hero seeking glory. He sounded like a kind young man who had listened to her story with compassion. "Go," Medusa said, her voice tight. "Go," Medusa said, her voice tight. "Now, Perseus, and do not come back." "Why? What? Just go," she cried, and the serpents of her hair hissed in agitation. She heard him retreat, his footsteps quick and startled, fading into the night. And Medusa sat alone once more, looking at the moon's reflection on the water, and she wept. Days passed. Medusa tried to push the encounter from her mind. Perhaps Perseus would leave. Perhaps he would decide she was not worth the risk. Perhaps he would forget her. But fate, once set in motion, is not so easily turned aside. One morning, she woke to the sound of footsteps approaching through her garden of stone. She knew, even before she saw him, that it was Perseus. She knew, too, that he had not come to talk this time. She rose and stepped out from the ruins of the temple, keeping her eyes downcast. "You came back," she said. "I had to," Perseus said. His voice was heavy with regret. "There is a king who holds my mother captive. He will not release her unless I bring him the head of the Gorgon. I do not want to do this. After speaking with you, but I have no choice. My mother will die if I fail." Medusa felt a strange calm settle over her. "I understand," she said. "We are both trapped by the will of others. You by a cruel king, I by cruel gods. Perhaps it is time for this to end." "I am sorry," Perseus whispered. "I know," Medusa said. She closed her eyes. "Do it quickly," she said. "And, Perseus, when you tell the story, when you return home, and they ask you about the monster you slew, tell them the truth. Tell them I was not always a monster. Tell them I was made into this by those who should have protected me. Tell them I was once a girl who wanted nothing more than to serve her goddess in peace." "I will," Perseus promised. "I swear it." There was a long silence, then a single swift motion, and Medusa felt nothing. But death was not the end. Medusa found herself in a place between places, a twilight realm where the living and the dead do not quite touch. She had no body here. She was only consciousness, only awareness, floating in a soft gray mist. She felt no pain, no fear, no anger, only peace. After a time, though time had no meaning, here she became aware of a presence beside her. She turned and saw herself, not the monster she had been, not the priestess she had been, not the priestess she had once been, but something else, something truer. She saw herself as she truly was a soul that had endured, that had survived, that had found beauty even in a curse, that had remained gentle even when the world was cruel. "Welcome," said a voice, and Medusa recognized it. Athena stood before her, but not as the cold, angry goddess who had cursed her. This was Athena, as she truly was beneath the divine pride-wise, complicated, capable of regret. I was wrong, the goddess said simply. I punished you for a crime you did not commit. I let my anger at Poseidon fall upon you because you were easier to hurt. It was unjust, it was cruel, and I am sorry. Medusa looked at the goddess and felt nothing. No anger, no joy, just a quiet acknowledgement. What happens now? She asked. Now you are free, Athena said. Your curse is broken. Your suffering is ended. You may go to the place where all good souls go, to rest and be at peace, for as long as you wish. And then, if you choose, you may return, not as you were, but as something new. You may be reborn, given a new life, a chance to experience joy without pain, beauty without curse. Medusa considered this. I think, she said slowly, I would like to rest first, for a very, very long time. Athena nodded. That is wise. And then the goddess did something unexpected. She stepped forward and embraced Medusa. And in that embrace was an apology more profound than words, a grief for all the ways the gods had failed, their mortal children, a promise that some wounds, at least, could be acknowledged, if not undone. When they parted, Athena was gone, and Medusa was alone in the soft gray mist. But it was not a lonely alone. It was a peaceful alone, a chosen solitude, a rest well earned. Chapter 10. The Island After. On the island, time moved on. Perseus left, carrying with him the head of the Gorgon, and with it a story that he tried to tell truly, though those who heard it often reshaped it into something simpler, something with a clear hero and a clear monster. But a few heard the truth and remembered. The Garden of Stone remained. Over the years, the statues weathered and crumbled, returning slowly to the earth from which they had come. Moss grew over them, vines climbed them, birds nested in the stone hands and stone branches. The island itself became a place of legend, a place where sailors would not land, where the old stories said a monster had once lived. But those stories faded, as stories do, and eventually the island was forgotten. But the stones remembered. Each statue, as it crumbled, released back into the world the small life it had held. Not the bird or the goat or the sailor themselves, but the essence of that moment, that small piece of existence frozen in time. And those essences drifted out into the world like seeds on the wind, like memories, like dreams. They settled into the soil and the sea, into the hearts of those who passed by, into the collective memory of the world, and they whispered a truth that would never be completely lost, that there are no true monsters, only those who have been hurt so deeply that they can no longer help but hurt in turn. That cruelty creates cruelty, and only compassion can break the cycle. That every creature called a monster was once something else, someone whole, deserved better. Chapter 11. The Dream Garden. In the place beyond where Medusa rested, time passed differently. She slept, and in her sleep she dreamed. She dreamed a garden, not a garden of stone, but a garden of living things. Flowers that bloomed in every color, trees that bore sweet fruit, birds that sang in the branches, fountains that played their gentle music. In this garden she walked as herself, her true self, with no curse, no serpents, no gaze that turned flesh to stone. She walked barefoot on soft grass. She felt the sun warm on her skin. She heard the wind in the leaves and the distant sound of the sea. And she was not alone. In her dream garden there were others, all those who had been hurt by the carelessness of gods, all those who had been called monsters when they were only trying to survive, all those who had been called monsters when they were only trying to survive, all those who had endured when endurance should not have been necessary. They walked together in the garden, and they did not need to speak. Their presence was enough. The understanding between them was enough, and Medusa, who had been so alone for so long, found that she could finally rest completely, knowing she was no longer isolated in her suffering, knowing that she was seen and understood and accepted. The garden grew and grew in her dreams, expanding to hold all who needed it, becoming a place of infinite gentleness, infinite peace. And there, in that place, she had created from her own need for comfort. Medusa, finally, truly, let go. Listener, the story is ending now. But stories, like lives, do not truly end. They transform. They change. They become something else. Medusa's story became a cautionary tale, a myth, a symbol. But beneath all those interpretations, there was always the truth of a woman who was hurt, who was transformed by that hurt, and who found a way to survive with dignity and grace despite everything. Her garden of stone crumbled and returned to the earth. Her name became a word people spoke to frighten children. But somewhere, in the place beyond, she rests in her dream garden, at peace at last. And the lesson, if there is one, is this, that those who suffer deserve compassion, not judgment. That cruelty, even divine cruelty, is still cruelty. That survival is its own form of heroism. And that every monster was once someone who simply wanted to be loved.